vast of moral issues that almost any one of these could probably have an entire lesson dedicated to them. But just in a general way, of course, the design of this workbook is to help new Christians. It is for those of us that have been Christians for some time, to reinforce just some of the fundamental truths and the things that are required of us, things that we need to know as we go about our daily walk with the Lord. And so we'll just look at some of these things on page 47, and we'll look at them. We'll look at them in not any particularly great detail because of the amount of material that there is that might be covered. But we start at the top on the list. There is the matter of abortion. And the statement is clear, and it is concise, and it is accurate. Abortion is wrong because it is the taking of human life. I would add to that, it is the taking of innocent human life. Because the taking of human life in and of itself is not a sin. And the exception obviously is that the Bible endorses and upholds the death penalty. And that is the taking of a human life. From the very beginning, really not the beginning, because what the text teaches us with regard to capital punishment is in Genesis 9, which is about 1,650 years after the creation. But, it says, whoever sheds man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. But we could even go all the way back to the days immediately following the Garden of Eden and see that when Cain killed his brother Abel, he made the statement, my punishment is greater than I can bear. And he also made the statement that I need protection. Because whoever it is that finds me will kill me on the account that I killed my brother, and he was admitting that he deserved to die because of what he had done. And we sometimes mistake the mark of Cain as being some type of negative mark, but it was actually an affirmative mark that God put on him to protect him from anyone who might avenge the blood of Abel. And so the taking of human life is not in and of itself inherently wrong, but abortion is inherently wrong because it is the taking of innocent human life. I don't know why there's not a passage there. We could look at the book of Proverbs just by way, if we were going to write a passage in and look at one. You can look at Proverbs chapter 6, and we start in about verse 16. And it says, these 6 things the Lord hates, yes, 7 are an abomination to him: a proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood. And all through the Old Testament, God spoke to the matter of the condemnation of His people and other people for the shedding of innocent blood. Now, when it was found in other biblical contexts, it doesn't mean that all those are references to abortion. It just simply means the shedding of innocent blood is an abomination to the Lord. Whether it be the committal of a murder, or be it some form of child sacrifice that was prominent in the Old Testament, infanticide, with regard to the worship of Molech. Anytime you see the phrase "made his son pass through the fire," you're talking about a child sacrifice where they literally fried a child on the brass hand of the idol Molech. And then, of course, the Bible speaks in the Old Testament that if two men are fighting and they strike, if a man strikes a woman who is pregnant and it causes her to have a miscarriage, then the text says, you shall pay life for life. So that tells us about God's attitude toward the unborn. Also, with respect to the Greek language of the New Testament, that the Greek language at that time was a rich and deep and very broad language. Okay, there were a lot. There's even a website called The Greeks Had a Word for It. So the Greek language was an incredibly deep and rich and specific language, and yet there is no reference or difference in the Greek language as the Bible uses it to distinguish between a child that is in the womb, a child that has just been born, a toddler, or even an adolescent. The same Greek word, brephos, if you were spelling it out, B-R-E-P-H-O-S, brephos. For example, when the Bible speaks about John the Baptist, leaping in his mother's womb, the child, brephos. The infant Jesus is a brephos. Then they brought little children to Jesus, brephos. And then Paul even said to Timothy that from a child, brephos, you have known the Holy Scriptures, which are able to make you wise unto salvation through the faith which is in Christ Jesus, 2 Timothy 3 and verse 5. And so the Greeks made no distinction between a child in the womb, a newborn, a toddler, or even what we might refer to as an adolescent. And so these consistencies of use teach us that God believes that little children are innocent. They are innocent. They're not only innocent in the sense of criminality, they are also innocent in the sense of spirituality. The Bible does not teach that children inherit the sin of their parents. There's not a single inclination anywhere in the text that says children are born with the sin of Adam, or that all children have been born sinful from the time of the Garden of Eden afterward. If that were the case, Jesus would not say, unless you be converted and become as a little child, you cannot inherit the kingdom of heaven. Or in Matthew 18, or then in Matthew 19, suffer the little children to come to me and do not forbid them, for of such are the kingdom of heaven. So the Bible is clear about the physical innocence or the criminal innocence of children, and also the spiritual innocence of children. And in this respect, and by the way, this would also go in some of the other things that we're going to talk about. Just because a thing is legal does not make it moral. A lot of people have the idea that if the law says that a thing can be done, then we can do that thing. But legality, in accordance with the thinking of men, does not equate to morality with regard to the mind of God. There are a lot of things that are legal that are not moral. I mean, if that were the case, then when I was in this, I know this is a terrible example, but it only shows you the ridiculousness of where you can take how absurd you could become in making these statements. When I was in Pahrump, which is, it's probably been 10 or 15 years ago. Pahrump's just on the other side of the mountain from Las Vegas. All right? And Pahrump is the home of the famous Mustang Ranch. It's a brothel. It's a legal brothel. I mean, they advertise on the internet. They have a gift shop. I mean, I didn't see the gift shop. I saw it online. Okay, but when I was in Pahrump, I thought I was like, I think that Mustang Ranch is somewhere close to here, and I looked it up, and it was just a few miles out of town. All right, but if legality equals morality, then visiting a brothel would be moral. And obviously nobody, and especially no woman, is ever going to accept that as being a moral case. All right. So legality does not equal morality. All right. So with regard to abortion, by the way, at the end of that little paragraph, when it says "Thou shalt not kill," a lot of people oppose the death penalty on the grounds of the Bible says "Thou shalt not kill." The word there is literally murder. If you look at some of your more modern translations, the word there is "you shall not murder." There are different words for killing and murder. Okay, and the word that appears in the Ten Commandments is the word for murder. It's not the word literally for all killing. Okay, and so abortion is wrong. Right? Then the use of drugs is wrong, and obviously it says not legitimate medicinal purposes, because everything you take from a pharmacy is it's a drug. All right, so we want to be again clear in our communication. We're talking about things that harm our bodies, that fall outside of the realm of medicine. I like the phrase there, legitimate medicine. All these things. To give you an idea about how old this book, or how long ago this book was written, it says marijuana and cocaine are not legal in this country. Well, that's no longer true, because marijuana is legal in a lot of places in this country. By the way, just to go back to legality does not equal morality. You would have the issue of brothels would be moral in Nevada and immoral in Alabama. And the same would go with just because marijuana might be legal in California or Oregon or Denver, or Colorado or someplace, but it's illegal in 43 other states. In other words, it doesn't mean that it's right to do it in those states and wrong to do it in the other states. All right, and so there's the push for the legalization, particularly of marijuana, but it's still these things would still be wrong because they violate the biblical principles and admonitions, and I'm using the term sobriety in the broadest sense. Normally we think about being sober as being not drunk, but the real issue of sobriety is being in your right mind, unaffected by any type of intoxicant, be it alcohol or cocaine or marijuana or whatever drug that someone might choose to use. And so you have the matter of drugs. We're to be sober minded. We are to be always in control of ourselves. And the use of drugs is antithetical to self-control. And so it would be something that would be inconsistent with Christian living, because it would be inconsistent with the control of our minds, our emotions, and our actions. Then you have in the third case, you have the matter of gambling. By the way, years ago when they first passed the lottery and casino gambling in Missouri, I knew some Christians that thought because it was now legal that it was also ethical and moral to buy lottery tickets. Again, the same principle applies. Gambling. You say, well, why? And we probably need to talk a little bit about this. The Bible endorses a number of ways whereby we can get gain. Okay. In other words, there are a number of legitimate ways for human beings to get financial gain. First and foremost is what? Work. That's right. First and foremost is work. From the very beginning, even though Adam and Eve lived in the Garden of Eden, he still had to work, right? He had to tend the garden and keep it. Okay, that would have required effort on his, work on his part. So from the very beginning of time, man has. But put it this way, I believe all men have an inclination to work. And when I say men, I mean humanity. Okay? have an inclination to work. Now, I think that men and women differ in their inclinations in regard to work, because I would never say that being a housewife is not work. I mean, that would be insane for me to say that, because that is a job that I would never want. All right, but we have natural inclinations to work, right? A person has to be taught not to work. Just like they have to be taught not to believe in God. All over the world, everybody believes in some type of divine being, right? Even if they don't believe in the God of heaven, everybody believes in some God or multiplicity of gods, right? The only people that don't believe in God are the people that are being taught not to believe in God. And it's the same way with work. You have to be taught not to work. That's why we have generations of people, one generation after another, that are on public welfare. They've been taught, that's the life they've been taught. If there wasn't, if the government wasn't handing out billions and billions and billions of dollars every day, you know what people would do? They'd work. They would work, because if you don't work, you don't eat. That's exactly right. If a man will not work, neither let him eat. 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verse number 10. All right? But by the way, and work is honorable. All honest work is honorable. I'll give you an example of this real quick. I remember being with Jeffrey, and we went into Taco Bell one night. Might have been after a ball game or something, but I was out and about and had Jeffrey and a couple of his friends with him, and we went into Taco Bell, and one of the other friends was like working at the Taco Bell, was working behind the counter, and I could tell that he was embarrassed to be on that side of the counter when all of his friends were on, the opposite side of the counter. And everybody ordered and whatnot, and the boys went and they got their drinks. And when they all left, I pulled that boy close. I said, let me tell you something. Don't ever be ashamed of honest work. Don't ever be ashamed of honest work. And I could tell he appreciated me saying that. But there are a lot of people that don't appreciate honest work. Right? But work is the primary way to get gain. What's another way the Bible endorses for us to get gain? Usury, interest, or let's just talk about investment, right? It's an investment. Usury is simply lending money for interest. All right?
Or just using money.
Right.
Like you're buying something, selling it.
Buying and selling. Okay, I was thinking on that side, but that's also right. Yeah, to buy and sell. All right? The Bible certainly endorses that, right? I mean, the Bible endorses, and we'll just say investment, because when you're buying and selling, you're actually investing in that thing in order for it to give you a return. So investing is a Bible honorable way.
And that's no different than growing something and selling it.
That's right. It's no different. Yeah.
Making something.
That's right. It's no different than making something or growing something and selling it. It's all an investment. Right? You might invest in a garden or a farm or cattle or time or whatever. All right. So, but even literal investments are endorsed by the Bible. Right. In the parable of the talents, the one talent man was condemned, and what did the man say? What did the master say? He said, at the very least, you should have put it in the bank so that I could have drawn interest on that money. So we know that which, by the way, that's not the best investment by a long shot, but you can put your money in the bank and draw interest on it. All right, so we know that investment or usury is an honorable means of gain. What's another one? Say it out loud, Judy.
Inheritance.
Inheritance. The Bible endorses inheritance. I mean, in fact, the Old Testament is filled with matters of inheritance, and even in the life of Jesus, he dealt with the matter of inheritance, right? Luke chapter 12, tell my brother to give me some more inheritance. And Jesus said, man, that ain't my job. That's not why I'm not here to settle your financial disputes. And then what about this? How about just a gift? Gifts are honorable ways of receiving. And sometimes your gift is early inheritance. They allow people now to give lump sums of money to people tax free. And there's a limit on that per person. At one time it was almost $15,000 a year. You could just give to your kids or your grandkids or anybody, and they didn't have to declare it as income. And they didn't have to pay taxes on it. Right? Gift. Right? The problem with gambling is, and by the way, and in all of these cases, nobody loses in order for me to gain. Is that right? Nobody loses. If I work, nobody loses. We're exchanging my time and my effort for a paycheck. Right? Inheritance, nobody loses. Nobody loses. Investment, nobody loses. If I buy stock in a company and it returns an investment, that means the company succeeded and therefore I succeeded. Now, the difference is in gambling, somebody's got to lose. Somebody has to lose in order for me to gain by gambling. Because if somebody goes to Vegas and they hit the slot and that slot pays $5 million, where did that $5 million come from? That's other people's money, right? That's other people's money. Or even in playing cards. A lot of times, men get together. I remember, again, when I was in Pahrump, when I come in late at night after all the services were over, and I was in a hotel, and every hotel is also a casino, and I stumbled upon a group of guys that they got together and they played poker every night. Same guys. I watched hundreds of dollars change hands while I was just sitting in there chatting and visiting with those guys. But if some dude brought home $1,000 from that table, where did it come from? It came from somebody else at that table. All right, so gambling desires income at somebody else's expense. Without any effort, without me contributing anything to that. Is that right? I go in and I buy a lottery ticket. I want to win. But if I want to win, what does that mean? That means about 10 million people got to lose. And then I didn't invest anything in that. All I did was bought a ticket. And so, gambling is not a biblically enjoined way of making a living. Okay? Now, I saw this not long ago, and I saw it more than once. I saw two different polls of millennials and Gen Zs, and what their plan was for retirement. And do you know what 40% of them said that their plan was for retirement? Win the lottery. 40% of them said their plan for retirement was to win the lottery. I mean, they're even dumber than we thought, John. To win, you're far more, again, this is still true today as it was the day when I was a kid and heard this first time. You're far more likely to be struck by lightning than you are to win the lottery. Far more likely to be struck by lightning than to win the lottery. It's just like, man, we are in big trouble because we're going to have to take care of those people because they're going to, whatever they have, they're going to blow every bit of it on the lottery. All right, so gambling. All right, what about, then of course, in the fourth place, the matter of pornography. Pornography just simply means the literal word is sexually explicit writings or some type of drawing. Porn comes from porneia, which is the word in our Bibles for fornication. Then Graphy is graphic or writing, some type of writing or drawing. And these things are, first of all, they're harmful. They're harmful to us as individuals. A lot of people do not understand how badly pornography affects the brain development of young men. It literally changes the way their brains work. I mean, by the way, that's not a scare tactic. That's absolute science. That viewing pornography. And by the way, it also works the same in older men, but it's far more devastating to younger men, like preteens and teens, because their brains are still forming until they're well into their 20s, and when they get doses of pornography, it literally changes the way their brains work. All right? So it's harmful to them individually. All right? Then, by extension, it's also harmful to anybody they might marry. By the way, and that's why pornography is is so devastating to married couples. Back in the 70s, when pornography was really making a big push in the 70s and 80s, here's an interesting thing. All of the social scientists said the proliferation of pornography is going to turn men into rapists. That's what they all said. It's going to ruin men and turn them into rapists. And then you know what ended up happening? The very opposite. The very opposite. Men who were married began to consume pornography, and especially in larger quantities, and then they couldn't relate in any way to their wives. I don't mean any offense to any of you ladies, but most of you are not porn material. Wait a minute. I think you're missing my point. All right. So, but what happens is a man consumes large amounts of pornography involving women that are they're in the upper echelons in any beauty contest, right? All right. So then he comes home. And then his wife doesn't look anything like that. And then all the other things that are associated, then he can't even associate with his wife. And then the entirety of his sexual outlet comes through pornography and not through the God-given means that of the marriage bed. It ruined a lot of marriages, but not in the way that the social scientists thought. And by the way, that's still going on. It's still going on. And by the way, it's a problem in the church. It's a problem in the church. I know a number of gospel preachers, elders, and deacons who have all had porn addictions. This was at least 17 or 18 years ago. At least 17 or 18 years ago. I had a woman email me about her husband, who was an elder in the church, who in the previous year had spent $25,000 pursuing his porn addiction. $25,000. Elder in the church. We need to be mindful of the fact that this is a problem. And it's far more widespread than most people in the church understand. But we need to help our young men avoid these types of things, to help them develop properly, naturally, spiritually, and help them to stay away. And here's the problem now: if a kid's got a cell phone, he's got access to unlimited pornography. Free of charge. Doesn't cost anything. It's out there. So that's another thing we'd want to be mindful of before we start giving our kids cell phones. is restricting access to things that they don't need to have. By the way, and there's a lot of programs, apps, and even phones out there that work in that respect to help protect our young men. Bottom of page 47, the matter of profanity. Profanity is becoming so commonplace in our society. Man, I think now the women might be worse than the men, or maybe it's just that I'm so unaccustomed to hearing it from women. It just seems like it's worse. But it's unbelievable. It is unbelievable. I mean, it's on social media. It's at Walmart. I mean, it's in the workplace. You hear women talking to one another, and you think it's some kind of sailors' convention. It's just unbelievable. It's unbelievable the amount of profanity that people are spewing, into the public air, and ask my wife if she hears it in the 6th grade. I mean, ask my wife if she hears it in the 6th grade. Because I guarantee you, I hear the stories. All right? I hear the stories. Ma'am? Kindergarten, yeah. Yeah, hear it in kindergarten. I remember this past year, Jeff Goff and I were at a ball game, and he's keeping the clock, and I'm on the PA. And there were some young teenage guys sitting behind us about 3 rows back. And man, they were just cussing a blue streak. And Jeff just finally got a bait of it. And he told him, he said, look, he said, you guys are not going to sit here and talk like that. He said, you can either shut up or move. He said, do y'all boys talk like that at home? And one of them boys said, yep. And he was probably telling the truth. Probably telling the truth. I'll just tell you this. I got my teeth brushed with soap for saying a whole lot less than them boys were saying at the ball game. All right? But, it's just... and let me just make mention. I'm about to run out of time. The argumentation at the bottom of page 47 is not good. Okay? Taking the Lord's name in vain means to swear by the name of the Lord and not follow through with that swearing. Okay? That's what it means. Don't take the Lord's name in vain. The Bible says that you could swear by the Lord. God said, if you're going to swear, swear by me. But if you swear by me, you better not take my name in vain. Okay, that's what Exodus 20 and verse 7 and Deuteronomy 5 and verse 11 are talking about in taking the Lord's name in vain. Now, there are references elsewhere in the Old Testament, for example, about profaning the name of the Lord. To profane the name of the Lord simply means to take a thing that is holy and turn it into something that is common. That's what it means to be profane. Take something that is holy and treat it as common. Okay, that's what we're really hearing when we hear people using the Lord's name in flippant ways. All right, and so we want the argumentation to be right. And then, for example, like in Matthew 26:74, when Peter began to curse and to swear, well, people thought he was using bad language. That's not. That's what happens when we use our meaning of words to describe biblical meaning of words. To curse and to swear meant he pronounced curses on himself and took oaths that he did not know who Jesus was. That's what it means when Peter began to curse and to swear. It doesn't mean he let loose a bunch of 4-letter words. Like I was taught when I was a kid. We got to be better than that. We got to be better than that in our understanding and application of the Scriptures. Now, the Bible does say we are to let no corrupt communication proceed out of our mouth. Ephesians 4 and verse 29. And even though it's out of context, you remember the accusation against Peter in his denial of the Lord was, your speech betrays you. He didn't mean what he said, he meant his accent. His language was such that he knew that he was an associate of Jesus by his dialect. Okay? And so, but there's a sense in which if we were going to use that out of context in another way, there are people who say they are Christians, but their speech betrays them. Or they use what we would call profanities, curse words, whatnot. And so profanity is so commonplace in our society, and thus we have to be on guard. And by the way, it's to the point now that when people don't use profanity, it stands out. Dave and I were playing golf about a year ago up in Arnold, and this dude was playing by himself, and he says, "Hey, you mind if I play with you guys?" It's like, well, yeah, you can, but we're not very good. He goes, well, I'm not very good either. And he was telling the truth. And so we played, I don't know, I think we might have played most of a round together. And we all sprayed the ball all over the course, hit balls in the woods, in the creek, whatnot. And we got done with that round. I said, Dave, did you notice something about that guy? He said, besides that he wasn't very good at golf? It's like, I said, that dude did not say one curse word the whole time we played. We played 18 holes. That guy did not curse one time. And that's in St. Louis, y'all. It's not like, obviously being in the South ain't what it used to be. But that was in St. Louis. That guy never said one profanity, the whole round. And I noticed that. In other words, profanity has become such in our society that when people don't use profanity, if I watch people, I know y'all think I'm crazy, but I watch fishing. All right, and you can tell when a guy doesn't use profanity. You know what I'm saying? By the way he conducts himself while he's fishing and catching fish, he doesn't use the Lord's name flippantly. By the way, do y'all pick up on that when people say and they don't use the Lord's name in a flippant way? It's like, hey, wait a minute. There's something different about that person, right? Stand out. Well, same thing for us as Christians. Our language, our use of language, and failure to use other language ought to cause us to stand out from the world. All right, then we have. I'm going to run out. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Since the next lesson is also on recreation and entertainment, I'm going to tie page 48, the lesson we're in now at the top of 48, with the lesson next week on the bottom of 48, since they are fairly closely related, because there are some things I don't want to omit because of the sake of time. So we'll pick that up, Lord willing, next Sunday.